know me, my name is Nancy Correa. I serve on the board and also manage all things social and digital for ELLAS Century. That's kind of my part-time slash full-time job. As a full-time, I work as a content editor for Google, and I also work for another organization out here called the Practice Space as a digital strategist. My background, I started in media. So I used to be with Univision Communications. I was with them for a little bit over 5 years before I transitioned into tech just this year in March. So I just have a few months in the tech industry. And I started putting together these events because unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we are not going to be able to do our annual empowerment conference, one. And two, we're not going to be able to do the work that we do normally, conducting these workshops and these type of talks on campus with schools. So one of the things I took the initiative of starting is these type of virtual talks with the idea of bringing in as many students as we can, but we obviously make it open to also professionals to come in. And I invite guest speakers to talk about either a podcast, a TED Talk, that they had an impact with. In this case, today, we have our special guest speaker, Yarel Ramos. And the idea is that with this event, the series of events, is a donation-based event. So anybody who wants to contribute $5, $7, whatever the case may be, you can go to ellascentury.com/donate. And these funds then go back to ELLAS girls who are currently being affected. We would then identify them. But that's why it's just a donation based. And for students, this is a completely free, obviously, virtual series of events. So with that being said, I want to introduce our special guest speaker today, Yarel Ramos. For those of you who might not know her, just really briefly before she introduces herself, she is a journalist. Right now, she anchors Edición Digital California, which airs Monday to Friday throughout the state of California, not only TV, but also through all the digital platforms. And she is also the host of Wait, Hold Up podcast. If you haven't listened to it, I did put it down on this event's agenda. Make sure to follow them as well at Wait, Hold Up Pod on Instagram. And you can follow Yarel under Yarel _ Ramos on Instagram as well. So I'll give you the virtual mic, Ms. Yarel.
Oh my gosh. Can you guys hear me? Is the sound good? I was trying to not have anything on so that you guys are able to hear me. Thank you guys. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everybody. Hello. This is the new, right? Like the new space for communication and the new space to be able to stay connected with so many people. So I'm just really cool that we're able to have this space to hang out virtually and talk about whatever it is that you guys want to talk about today. I've been a friend of Nancy for many years now, and I'm just extremely inspired by the work that she's doing and that she wants to do with ELLAS. I don't know how she does it. Right now, when she was saying I'm this, and that, I was like, she does. And she's completely committed to all these organizations, completely committed to empowering young women. And I think there's so much value in that. So, if you can, please make sure to send her a little note of appreciation, because it's a lot of work to put these things together. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy, and, just making sure that all the assets are taken into account. With that being said, just
Thank you.
wanted to say hello. Yeah, I'm just so proud of you for everything that you're doing and that you continue to do. And I think, for women like ourselves that come from humble backgrounds, from very humble beginnings, from pretty much very limited knowledge into what the real world was like at a young age. I think for us, for sure, it's a part of just our natural who we are, to make sure that we give back, to make sure that we continue to tell our stories, to make sure that we reach out to young women. I would have signed up for any program when I was in high school that was going to be able to connect me or to make sure that I had the direct link to someone that looked like me, to someone that came from similar environments and communities where I came from someone that could just be a message away, to make sure that I was okay or on the right path. I grew up in California, in LA, in the San Fernando Valley. I'm the firstborn of three. My parents, both immigrants from Mexico, and, with very limited education. They came here precisely for that, to look for opportunities in search for that American dream. So I think for myself growing up, it was just that realization of, what is it that is attainable, right? Because we sometimes, as when we're young, the idea even of college is so far-fetched, right? The idea of higher education is just far beyond our normal conversations at home, because our parents just sometimes they don't know, right? They
Right.
want to help you, and they do with whatever it is that they have, but they're also, very limited to their own knowledge, and they're trying to get by, and they're trying to work 2-3 jobs. So I think for me, as well as for Nancy, and I think why I'm all in with her with this organization and the stuff that they do for young girls, is precisely for that. Because I think that when we reach a level of success, a level of understanding in our careers and in our lives, we have to, it's part of our social responsibility to make sure that we reach out and we help other people, whether it's young girls or young men that have questions, concerns, interests that are similar than ours. And I hope that, that also when other women too, when you guys that are listening, all you youngsters in high school, and realize the power in community, the power in making sure that we always just lend a hand whenever we can. Because again, I would have signed up for any organization that was able to give me that scope, right? A little bit of that understanding. I'm like, listen, this is the way, this is the best advice I can give you about college. This is the best route you can go through, or this is what I recommend. This is what I can give you in terms of my experience. So with that being said, just really happy to be here, really happy to connect with all of you, to talk with you, to answer your questions. And like Nancy said, I am an anchor, a news anchor at Univision here out of LA, a newscast that airs all over California and obviously on all social and digital platforms. It was like, I feel like my newscast has been like a foreshadow for everything we're living now. Like we look at newscasts, we watch the news, and reporters are at their house and their kids are running in, and the audio goes away, and everything is very digitally connected. I feel like my newscast was that when we just launched, which was like 3 years ago. Kind of the new wave of digital media and of news and information, where we, for the most part, consume almost everything from our devices, from our laptops, from our iPads, from our phones. So that's the space that we're living in now. And I do that. I do news. I studied broadcast journalism and international relations when I was in high school and college, with the hopes and the dreams that I wanted to become like a war correspondent. Like that was my dream. I wanted to be like the Mexican Christian Amanpour and travel the world and go to war zones and go to just different countries and be exposed to like the realities that other people face. Because the world functions very interesting, because life is very interesting.
You wanted to be in the field.
Yeah, I wanted to be in the field. I wanted to be a war correspondent. I wanted to be interviewing like leaders in other countries. I wanted to do like a lot of social responsibility when it came to reporting and news. Ironically, I was very young when I left college. I graduated early from high school, graduated early from college. So when I started my career, I was extremely young. I literally had just gone through puberty. So I looked like a 12-year-old. So that was another story.
Tell us how young you were.
I know. I was like, everybody's like, I don't think you're not even old enough to go abroad. So that was very interesting for me, because I started I did a lot of internships in college. So then when I was looking for, what's going to be the next thing to do, I studied actually at the University of Miami in Florida, and I got like a scholarship there. That's the reason why I went there. So when I was there, I did a lot of internships. I was the intern queen. I interned everywhere. everywhere. And in one of my internships, one of my producers here at ABC7 in LA connected me to someone that worked at another station. And when I graduated, funny enough, I was like, I'm taking time off. I'm going to go backpacking through Mexico. I'm just going to take a break. I want to spend time with my family. And about like a week after I get back home from Miami, they call me from the station here in LA, and they're like, oh, we're looking for 2 reporters, and your name came about talking to people. And I'm like, there's no way. I think I was like 19 years old.
Oh,
so I was
my
like, there's
God.
no way they're gonna hire me, right? I'm like, there's no way. Like, why would they? And just knowing that, I just didn't even feel ready. Like, I'm straight. My stories from college were, I don't even want to look back at that tape. I think my mom has it. I'm going to burn it when I find it. I don't want to see it. But yeah, I went into the interview and I'm like not expecting much. And they right then and then they're like, okay, can you start tomorrow? And I went back home thinking I wanted to go backpacking to Mexico. Like, I have plans.
Right.
I have things to do. Talking to my parents, giving me that realization, like, these opportunities don't come that often, and Mexico will always be there, and you'll be able to travel through Mexico and do a bunch of other things, but right now this opportunity might not come around. So anyway, I started there. I was a really young reporter. They sent me on the field to do local stories, and the first local story that they sent me to was a little boy that had died. The garbage truck kind of run him over, and that was my first story. So you guys can imagine, 19, I was a hot mess. I was just didn't understand why this had happened. Existential questions were going through my mind, and I was crying with the mom when I was interviewing her. And local news is very like that. Local news is very local, of like things that happen occasionally, and for the most part, it's not the most amazing stories, right? So anyway, long story short, the producer there was like, you know what, you're great, you're a go-getter, yeah, all these things they tell you. They're like, but you know what, you're not. I don't think you're ready for local news. And shattered my dreams, right? I'm like, if I'm not ready for local news, then I'm definitely not ready to go, to go to war zones. Like, definitely not ready to go abroad. So anyway, the producer there was like, why don't you do entertainment? Why don't you do fun stuff? Like, what are girls your age doing? What are their interests? And I was like, I don't know, lady, I'm a nerd. I don't do anything. Anyway, I became the entertainment girl there. I was there for like about a year. And then this network that was owned by Telemundo, about a year that I was there, reached out to me and it was like, listen, we're looking for VJs to do our entertainment shows and our music shows. And again, your name was kind of passed down around. We would love to have you for an interview. And again, I was like, entertainment, I'm a serious journalist. I want to be going to war zones. That's my dream. Yes. And
so for those of you that don't know, a VJ is a video journalist.
Video journalist, right? So it was a job for like a VJ, and at that point, it was like kind of like a video presenter, right? Like, if you ever heard of like MTV, like there was like the VJs that would present like now top 10 videos of the week. And this was obviously like 10 years ago when still music videos on TV were popular. But anyway, that was that. I went to the meeting, not expecting anything, went to the audition, did not know what an audition was, did not know even what, like Nancy said, a VJ was. And they were asking me a lot about Mexican music. And I was like, this is odd. Like, why would they ask me about Mexican music? And I'm Mexican. I was covering a lot of Mexican music. And my dad he's a music encyclopedia. So I grew up around a lot of music. So of course I knew, like, all the questions they were asking me. I was like, oh God, is this a joke? I know this. And anyway, went through the callback, which is it's another set of situations. I didn't know what a callback was. It's a casting. They do a casting. They screen a lot of people on air. I think it was like 400 people here in LA and like 300 people in Miami that went to the casting. I don't know why. I don't know how. I need to ask these people why they chose me. And they chose me. They went through the callback, got that job. And they were like, okay, we need you to start in 2 weeks. We launched the show. We want you to be the host of this show called Reventon, which was a show about music, about Mexican culture, Mexican music. And again, it was one of those moments where I'm like, I don't think I want to do entertainment, but life is taking me this route, and I will find ways to do what I want to do with this, right? It's my own show. Like, it's a dream for anybody on TV. And yeah, through those years, I was able to do a lot of stuff with music, with culture, with going back to Mexico and like talking to young people. I did a lot of news stuff, a lot of politics stuff. And that's sooner than later got me here at Univision, doing this newscast that, again, it's very different than your typical newscast. It's very dynamic. It's very fast. It's kind of grows on a lot of that stuff and talks and conversations that are going on social and digital media.
It's all over California. And one of the things you mentioned right now, saying that obviously at 19 you look younger than being 19, right. And I know I had assigned for people to listen to when do we stop trying to change ourselves from wait, hold up. Yarel hasn't mentioned it,
right.
But she did initiate this podcast. What is it, like 2 years ago?
It's been 2 years.
It's been 2 years already. Yeah. So aside from everything that she does, she also started a podcast. Yeah. And how often do you guys air episodes?
We used to do once a week. It used to be a weekly podcast, but we couldn't. It was really hard. Just my co-host works at Spotify Music, so she's a producer there. So it was just really difficult. So right now we're doing bi-weeklies. And, thankfully, it's been getting so much good feedback. We started as a political podcast, pop culture political podcast. We realized that was going to be really hard because those become very timely. So we made it a lifestyle podcast for women of color, especially to connect, to empower, to make sure we give the resources of like the questions, the interests that young women in different fields and different aspects of their life are looking for. So you shared a podcast.
Yes, and you being in this field, I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and feel free, anybody who has a question, to open up your mic and also ask if it's in regards to, or maybe not even a question, if you want to say a reaction or a comment about the podcast, or maybe share your personal story about when do you feel that you need to stop changing yourself. As for you, Yarel, like what has helped you realize that being you is all you need? Because that didn't start when you started this journey.
Right. No, and what's crazy, that we talk a lot about, being authentic, right? And like being yourself and doing all these things. I think for me, I've always been in that dilemma growing up, because one, I was that young Mexican girl who was extremely studious, who was, extremely nerdy at school and not very fitting into this stereotypical idea that we had from where I grew up. And even when I was in college, I went to college in Miami, where the Mexican population is minimal. And that idea that I didn't look sometimes Mexican enough to a lot of people always really kind of struck with me. When I started in news, that, completely in news, because even when I had my music show, I was still doing everything political for the network. I was covering all the campaigns. I was doing all the political rallies. I was covering conventions. I was doing, the 2012 campaign, which was a huge campaign. That was my first big political campaign, presidential election campaign. So I was still doing all these things. And it was always really hard for me to fit in, right? I never looked the part. My hair was too long. I wasn't I didn't look like the typical newscaster, or this idea that people have of a newscaster. I was very bilingual. I was always, kind of using both of my languages and the way that I grew up to navigate my spaces. So I think it's been a struggle, just in terms of identity, because I've always been very sure of who I am. I've always been very confident in who I am. I've always loved myself for who I am. But when you come into these corporate spaces, right, into just big companies and big worlds, and working with other people that already have set minds as to what you should look like, what you should do, how you should act, you come to realize that you don't want to be fitting in any boxes, that it's like, you know what, I don't want to cross all these, I don't want to cross all these check marks because that's not me. And I'm not going to change completely because there were parts of me that did do it, right? That did cut my hair, that did speak in a different way, that wasn't like socially connected as much as I was, like all these things that people were kind of like limiting in terms of like what they think society also sets on like what people should look like that do news on television. So that particular podcast, Nancy, that you mentioned, I think it was a very vulnerable one for both of us because we do episodes where it's just the two of us. Usually we'll interview someone, but we do like 2 or 3 times a year episodes where it's just the both of us and we just talk about different experiences or kind of like a catch up with each other. And in that one in particular, Jessica was going through like a really rough time talking about imposter syndrome, something that I wasn't really even aware of, right? Like I didn't really understand. And I was going through a really hard time, just kind of, again, people trying to box me in and be like, hey, this is what a journalist should look like, or this is what they already do. And it became a very vulnerable podcast. It's still like one of the top listened to because I feel like we all can, I think we all can relate. We all can relate when people want to pigeonhole you, when people want to describe you in whatever they think they are. And then they want to completely change you. I'm not a journalist that was born in another country. I'm a journalist that was born in the U.S., but that grew up with a very strong Mexican connection and Mexican influence. So that's a part of who I am. It will forever be a part of who I am. It will forever be a part of the things and the concerns and the issues that interest me and that bother me, because I grew up with not everything at my disposal. I grew up with a lot of limitations. I grew up with a lot of obstacles. And on top of that, it's like, hey, there's different layers to myself. There's a layer that loves politics. There's a layer that's a news junkie. But there's also a layer that loves clothing, and
fashion,
that loves to sew
makeup.
Clothes. Yeah. And there's another level that like really enjoys travel. And there's another layer that really loves to read, Harry Potter. And there's another layer. So it's like, as we show and as we take off these layers of ourselves, it's like before in television, it's like, nope, you can't. This is who you are. This box individual is who you are. And this is a box that you need to fit into. So now I feel like through, a lot of self-learning, a lot of self-love, a lot of self-acceptance, it's like, you know what? No, I don't want to be, I don't even want to be in that box. Like I'm going to create my own box. Like this is my box. And it's a box of understanding and appreciating the fact that I'm a woman with a lot of interesting facets, and I'm proud of her. So,
and how do you balance, just really quickly, because you mentioned how before a news anchor was boxed, and I love that now obviously there's social platforms, so that's another area, a field where you've obviously dominate very well. And given that your newscast is very digital and social, how have you been able to like interpret like those perceptions, ideas, comments that you get in regards to what you should publish on your social and what you shouldn't?
Right. I think the biggest thing was like realizing it, like, okay, these people want me to be like this, and want me to do these things, and then understanding that it's like that's their perception, right? That's their idea. It has sometimes maybe even nothing to do with me, and if I don't have to give in to that. I think a particular incident that I can share with you guys was I shared a photograph in a bathing suit for I was with my friends in, I don't remember, Palm Springs or Arizona for my birthday. And like when like everybody who goes into a pool wears a bathing suit, I was wearing a bathing suit, and I got these very like snarky remarks from people at my workplace, like, oh, if you want to be considered for the political kind of the conventions are coming up for the next election, to really be considered, you should be careful and not post those things. And I was just like, wait, okay, so first of all, I'm not supposed to be going in a pool with a bathing suit. What do you want me to wear? Like, I did it when I was a kid because I was very, not as confident with my body, and I wore a t-shirt and shorts. like every Mexican girl does, because that's what we're allowed, right? Like my dad would
Yes.
literally wear a bathing suit, or if you would wear one, you wear a t-shirt over it.
Yes.
So I mean, for real, right?
That
It's
was
so
me.
true. That was me. That was me growing up, because I was like, my dad's like,
Like bathing suit and then like a white t-shirt.
Totally. And I still think my mom sees me like this. She's like, "As I'm muy encuadrada," and I'm like, it's a one piece. Like, anyway, so yeah, that kind of like really struck me, and excuse me.
Yeah, it's that idea that,
and it really bothered me. Like,
what are you supposed to wear, like you mentioned, and that doesn't take away from the quality of work and the passion that you give every day.
So you don't think that other journalists vacation and they don't wear bathing suits? You know, like, come on now, everybody does. And I guess it was these preconceived. And I remember being like, I'm gonna take it down because it's gonna, and then at some point I'm like, no, I'm proud of it. Like, I'm proud of my body that I've worked because I enjoy fitness. I'm proud of like the fact that I can be okay with my body this way. I'm not, there's nothing raunchy about the photograph. There's nothing raunchy about this bathing suit. I'm like, and I feel confident. And it's like, so again, all these ideas, me fighting it. And then thinking back, like, because of this photo, I'm not going to be considered to be part of this team that I deserve to be a part of because I'm a very intelligent woman. Like, that doesn't have any criteria into my, the woman that I am in the workplace. So I think all these incidents and all these moments were very critical, and like me understanding that I'm not going to be able to cross out all these boxes, right? Everybody has their own ideas. I am who I am. Nobody's ever going to top me as the hardest working, as the one that's always willing to work, to participate. You cannot take that away from me. I will forever be that girl because that's naturally who I am. Whether I like to go to the beach outside, whether I enjoy travel, whatever else outside of this workplace. On the contrary, I think it adds on to the person that you are. It makes you more attainable. It makes you more real. Like, before, we didn't know what people were doing or what their views were or what they stood for.
Yeah, because everybody was the same inside a box.
You didn't talk about, and then you didn't talk about it. It's like, don't talk about, we don't want to know where you came from. Where it's like, well, this story is really personal to me because that's where I come from. So I don't want you to tell that story about my people because you don't know it. I do, because I grew up there. So I think you kind of like undoing, like, it's like an onion, right? And like undoing all your layers of your onion. Like, you start being like, it's okay to be this person that you are. You don't need to hide it. I cannot deny. Why would I deny that my parents were illegal here in this country for many years before they got their proper documentation? Why would I? That's part of who I am.
Of your story.
That's part of my family's story. And again, when we're not about these stories, when we're not okay with them, then we let other people talk about families like myself and the stories of families like myself. So I think, for sure, again, that episode was very, very vulnerable, and it was me kind of fighting about it, like being upset, like, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of fighting people. This is who I am. I love myself.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to take away the fact that nobody cares as much of my community like I do, and nobody's about it as much as I do, and they will never be able to take that away from me. And
that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed listening to it. And if anybody has a question, get ready to like unmute yourself and just ask. Was the fact that you guys were very vulnerable, and you just mentioned imposter syndrome, and that's something that I've dealt with a lot in my life behind the scenes. It's like being a people pleaser, especially when you start like in a corporate setting and you have that first job, not knowing how to say no. Where now I feel very comfortable to say no, but it's like Yarel mentioned, it's like a process and a journey that you have to go through. So I'll leave it open. If anybody has a question, a comment, a reaction, simply wants to say hi to Yarel. Don't be shy.
I love questions. I know they have so many questions. It's always like being shy, but this is a safe space.
Yes.
So
it's
ask away.
I see some people smiling, like they want to ask. You can just unmute yourself. I'll give awkward like 10 seconds of silence for people to gear up and like unmute themselves.
For the questions. And any question, is I mean, I know we all have just even concerns, even if you want to share something about what you're going through or something of a struggle that you can, want to talk about in around this topic. Like, again, this is a safe space, and we just really hope that we can bring you some guidance and some input. If not, it's going to be Nancy and I just talking this whole time.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for all that you do and for being a voice for a lot of Latinas. I mean,
thank
we
you.
Don't have so thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. It's so crazy right now. I'm like, can I give everybody a hug, right? So sending you a big hug. Thank you for that comment. I think it's also Wendy. Too that understanding that like we, for example, in the media, right, and like in news on television, I think people think this idea that everybody grew up wanting to be on television and not understanding that like, the responsibility, like the exposure, the vulnerability that comes with it. Funny anecdote, the first time when I was doing the show Reventón, it was a national show, and we went to Vegas for a huge concert, and we were doing our show from the actual concert, and a group of young girls, right? Like this was like at hours before the show started. I was recording and I was like, aquí estamos en Las Vegas, fiesta, Reventón, yeah, whatever. And I see like a few girls coming my way. And I told my camera, my photographer, who was a friend of mine, I'm like, Chente, those girls are like running over here. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, let's just move to another area. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to do. I'm embarrassed. And he's like, yeah, they're your fans. And I'm like, no. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, what am I going to do? What am I going to write? Like, they don't know me. Oh my God, I'm nobody. Like this idea that I was like just starting and like fans and fame was like a deal that I never even in my mind thought about. And I remember him putting me aside because I was really nervous. And he's like, listen, he's like, how would you feel if you would see someone that you admire and they would completely disregard you? And I was like, oh my gosh, I would be heartbroken. And he's like, well, these girls really admire you. And I'm like, but why? Like, I'm like, why? He's like, that's none of your concern. They just do. So you need to make sure that you always hold up yourself into that account because they're girls like yourself. And of course I wanted to cry and I wanted to be like, oh, Chente, oh my God, like help me. And
how old are you here?
I was like 21 probably, like 21
oh my
years
God,
old.
yeah.
I was just like, I was young. And again, fame to me was so unreal. I didn't understand. It to me was like, I interview famous people. I'm not a person of fame or of influence. And when that happened, that's when it really like it hit me like, oh, smack. Yeah, I want to be a journalist but that comes with this huge responsibility of exposure and of being, having access to all these people. So yeah, like what is it that I want my purpose in this profession to be? Do I want it to just be because I want to be famous and make money? No. Or do I want it to be meaningful? Do you want it to be, like really like community driven, heart driven? And that's a question that I give all of you guys. What is it that you guys want to change about the world? What is it that you guys are not okay with the world? I know, Nancy, for sure, I'm sure you have your experience as to why you chose your career and what it's done for you in terms of community and really like your purpose. I do the news, but why do I do the news? Well, because I care about community, because I want to tell my people stories, because I want to make sure that we have access to these tables. I want to make sure that we're empowered and inspired and that we have the resources and the tools to succeed. So those have to be like the basis, right? To make sure to impulse your life.
Right. And I think something key that you said is having that purpose and meaning to your life, because otherwise, if you do it for the wrong reasons, it'll start to wear you out in the long run. You're not gonna find you're not sincerely passionate about it. And this is why, out of all the things that I do, I do a lot with ELLAS, because I was one of those ELLAS girls. I was 14 years old when I joined the organization by going to one of these annual empowerment conference. Just really quickly before we start wrapping this talk with Yarel up, I want you guys on the chat to write a key takeaway from this talk that we had today. I'm going to be selecting someone at random for a ELLAS giveaway. So we'll send you guys a goodie bag And so if you can just start writing in the comments here, there's a little chat bubble. You guys can just click there and start typing away. So I'll give everybody some time before we start wrapping it up, but I just wanted to announce it. But yeah, I think it's important, because when people ask me like, why do you do so much for ELLAS? Because I don't get paid for it, but I think I don't get paid for it financially, but I think for me, it's what I give to the community. And I'm a person, and Yarel knows as well, I love going to events where I'm always getting inspired, empowered, listening to other speakers, learning. I love all of that. But a lot of the events that I do attend, they're already professional women attending these events. And I want to be able to create a space where high school girls get a little bit of a glimpse of that there's something else out there, get to hear these stories, these success stories, because that's what kind of triggered me when I was 14 and I attended my first conference. I had this idea that successful people were only successful because their parents had money or they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. And I had an idea that my parents did not have any money. They still live paycheck to paycheck. My two older sisters were high school dropouts. I knew I could probably graduate high school and my parents will be happy because my older sisters didn't give them that. But it's just having that idea that when I attended the first conference and I heard that first success, it was Maria Marin. She was with Univision. She had like a talk show and she gave her story. And I was like, oh, wow, it was the first time that I realized, hey, wait a second. She didn't have money and she made it. And from there, it just opened up a different world than my everyday environment. Because when you're in high school, when you're in school, like your everyday environment, sometimes it's like, when am I going to get out of this hole? I think as long as you continue to, thank you, Melissa, for dropping in your feedback there. As long as you continue to make those little goals and continue your journey, and you just meet a little goal by little goal takes you to the bigger goal eventually. So thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Palomares, she just said boss babes.
Oh yeah, she is one too. She's one too. Look at her in here.
Exactly.
Also, she's amazing too for that particular reason.
Exactly. Okay, well, thank you so much, Yarel, for joining us. If people don't want to feel shy and want to say one last thing, I know sometimes it's a little bit hard to unmute. If not, if you guys feel more comfortable sending Yarel a direct message on Instagram or anywhere on social media, she's under Yarel_Ramos.
That's right.
That's on her Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So if you feel more comfortable maybe sending her a direct message, you can do that. But thank you guys for joining, and thank you so much, Yarel. Janet saying, gracias, ladies, for the talk today. Let's read some of these few comments.
You guys.
Elizabeth, I learned not to change what I want to do or say. Melissa, I really like the idea about being an onion, saying that you are different layers to each of us that make up who we are and our identity.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, there's so many different things about you, that you should never create your own box to fit into. Don't let anybody tell you to fit into any box just because that's the way that society thinks that it's the right way. No, there's no right way. There's space for all of us to make it, to grow, to learn, and you can build your own path and you can build your own box.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Create your own box.
Thank you.
Keep the key takeaway coming. Those comments we'll save after this is done. So then I'll randomly select one of you girls as the winner. Thank you, Yarel, for joining us and for this chat.
Thank you, ladies. Big hugs to you. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Yarel. Have a good night.
Okay,
bye, ladies. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you so much for this. Bye.